The rain was pouring so hard that morning, most people stayed inside. But for Maya, staying home was not an option. A single mother with no car, no umbrella, and only one good pair of shoes, she walked 6 miles through the storm for one chance to change her life. Every step hurt. Her clothes were soaked. Her resume was nearly ruined. And waiting at home was her little boy, believing his mother would come back with good news. But Maya had no idea someone was watching her. Across the street, inside a black luxury car, Billionaire CEO Alexander Kane sat frozen, staring through the rain. He had seen many people arrive for interviews before, confident, polished, prepared. But he had never seen anyone fight this hard just to get through the front door. When Maya finally reached the company building, the receptionist looked at her dripping clothes and muddy shoes and made a judgment that would change everything. She told Maya the interview was cancelled. Humiliated, exhausted, and close to tears, Maya turned to leave. But before she could take one step back into the storm, the elevator doors opened. And Alexander Kane himself walked out. What he did next left the entire lobby speechless. But the real shock came minutes later, when Maya revealed why she had walked through the rain, what she had been hiding about her son, and the painful secret that connected her life to the billionaire's past. By the end of that interview, Alexander wasn't just offering her a job. He was facing a truth he had spent years running from. And Maya's 6-mile walk in the rain became the moment that changed both of their lives forever. Alexander Kane did not speak at first. He stood in the lobby of Kane Global Tower, his charcoal suit dry, his shoes polished, his silver watch catching the white light from the ceiling, while rainwater gathered in a small puddle around Maya's feet. Everyone watched him. The receptionist, Claire, still had one hand resting on the appointment tablet, her face pale now that she realized the man she had just tried to protect from an unsuitable candidate had seen everything. 2 security guards near the revolving doors straightened. A young assistant carrying files stopped halfway across the marble floor. Even the people waiting near the elevators went silent. Maya clutched her folder to her chest. The folder was bent at the corners and damp around the edges, but she held it like it contained the last piece of her future. Alexander's eyes dropped to her shoes. They had once been black. Now they were scuffed, soaked, and streaked with brown water from the sidewalks. One sole had begun to separate near the toe. He could see where she had tried to press it back together with tape. Something tightened in his chest. Not pity. Memory. For one terrible second, the shining lobby disappeared, and Alexander was 8 years old again, standing behind a cracked apartment window while his mother stepped into a storm wearing a thin blue coat that was missing 2 buttons. "Stay inside, Alex," she had told him, pressing her palm against the glass from outside, smiling as if rain could not touch the brave. "I'll be back before you know it." She had not come back before he knew it. Alexander blinked, forcing the memory away. "Who cancelled her interview?" he asked. His voice was calm, but the entire lobby felt the danger in it. Claire swallowed. "Mr. Kane, I only meant that Ms. Harper arrived in an inappropriate condition for a senior administrative interview. I thought perhaps we could reschedule." "That is not what you told her." Claire's mouth closed. Maya lowered her eyes. She had no desire to ruin anyone's job. Life had taught her how quickly one bad morning could become a bad month, then a bad year, but she was also too tired to defend a lie. Alexander turned back to her. "Ms. Harper." Maya looked up. "Yes, sir." "Did you walk here?" There it was, the question she had hoped nobody would ask. She could have lied. She could have said the bus broke down nearby or that a friend dropped her off at the corner. She had spent years making poverty look smaller than it was, folding need into polite excuses, smoothing desperation under phrases like, "Things are a little tight right now." But something in Alexander's face stopped her. Not his wealth, not his power. It was the way he was looking at her, as if the answer mattered to a part of him that had nothing to do with business. Yes, she said softly, 6 miles. A murmur moved through the lobby. Alexander's jaw hardened. Why? Maya hugged the folder closer. Because this interview was at 9, and I promised my son I would be here. Why not take a taxi? A faint, tired smile touched Maya's lips. It was not bitter, exactly. It was the kind of smile people wear when the answer is too obvious and too humiliating to say out loud. Because I had $7, she said, and I needed 5 of them for my son's medicine. The marble lobby went even quieter. Alexander heard Claire inhale sharply. Maya regretted saying it immediately. She hated the way people looked at her when they heard details like that. Some softened, some judged, some searched her face for proof that she had made poor choices and deserved the life she was trapped inside. She had seen all kinds of eyes in the last 3 years. Alexander's were the hardest to read. He stepped aside and gestured toward the private elevators. Your interview is not cancelled. Come with me. Claire hurried forward. Mr. Kane, your board review begins in 12 minutes. Move it. But the singer poor call. Move it. Sir, the press briefing. Alexander did not look at her. Cancel it. Claire froze. Cancel the press briefing. Alexander turned slightly. Is there a problem with my instructions today? No, sir. Maya's first instinct was to refuse. Something about stepping into that elevator felt too much like entering a world where she did not belong. Her wet clothes stuck to her skin. Her hair, which she had braided carefully at dawn, had loosened around her face. Her hands were cold. Her folder had begun to soften from the rain. And still, behind her embarrassment, one thought pushed her forward. Noah. She saw his face that morning, too serious for 7 years old, sitting at the kitchen table with a blanket around his shoulders because the heater had stopped working again. Mommy, he had said, watching her pin her hair back, when you get the job, can we fix the window first? Which window? The one that sings at night. Maya had smiled, pretending not to know he meant the cracked bedroom window that let wind whistle through the frame. Yes, first thing. And then, can we buy the cereal with the marshmallows? She had laughed then, because if she did not laugh, she would cry. That might be second thing. Noah had nodded, as if this was a reasonable business agreement. Then he had reached into his pajama pocket and pulled out a folded napkin. Inside were 3 coins. For luck, he said, and for bus money. She had not taken them. Now standing in Kane Global Tower, Maya stepped toward the elevator because her son believed she could come home with good news, and his belief was the only umbrella she had carried through the rain. The elevator doors closed behind her and Alexander. For several seconds, neither spoke. The private elevator climbed so smoothly Maya barely felt it move. The walls were dark glass. The control panel glowed with flaws she couldn't imagine needing. Her reflection stared back at her from every side, soaked, trembling, out of place. Alexander stood beside her, hands clasped in front of him, looking straight ahead. Ms. Harper, he said finally, do you want a towel, coffee, a change of clothes? The kindness nearly broke her, not because it was grand, but because it was practical. I don't want to be a burden, she said. You walked 6 miles in a storm to be here on time. You are not the burden in this building. Maya turned to him, surprised. He did not look at her, but his reflection did. In the glass, his face seemed less like the man on magazine covers and more like someone carrying a locked room inside him. I'm sorry about your lobby, she whispered. My lobby will survive water. The elevator reached the top floor. When the doors opened, Maya expected a row of assistants, glass offices, expensive artwork, maybe people speaking in hushed tones about numbers she could not understand. She did not expect warmth. The top floor was still elegant, yes, with floor-to-ceiling windows and a view of the city blurred by rain, but there were bookshelves too, and old photographs in black frames, and a small wooden toy airplane sitting on the corner of a conference table. Alexander, noticed her glance at it. "It was mine," he said. Maya looked away, embarrassed to be caught noticing. "It's beautiful. My mother gave it to me." The words left his mouth before he could stop them. He almost never mentioned his mother. In the business world, Alexander Kane's official history was polished until it shone. Son of industrialist Victor Kane, graduate of elite schools, founder of Kane Global Technologies, youngest CEO to take a family company from national manufacturing to global innovation. What the profiles never said was that Victor Kane had not raised him until he was 9 years old. Before that, Alexander had lived in a 2-room apartment above a laundromat with his mother, Ruth, who worked nights cleaning offices in buildings owned by men like the one her son would become. There were no photographs from those years in the company archives. Only the toy airplane. Ruth had bought it from a thrift store after Alexander saw a plane passing overhead and asked where people went when they flew. She had placed the chipped wooden plane in his hands and said, "One day, you'll go farther than this whole city, Alex, but promise me something." "What?" "When you get somewhere high, don't forget to look down." He had promised. Children promise easily, men forget professionally. Alexander led Maya into his office. It was enormous but strangely bare, as if he owned everything but used almost nothing. A long desk faced the windows. One wall held awards. Another held a black and white photograph of an old factory. Near the door was a sitting area with a sofa, 2 chairs, and a low table. A woman in her 50s entered almost immediately carrying towels, a robe-like company wellness jacket, and a pair of soft shoes still wrapped in plastic. "This is Mrs. Alvarez," Alexander said. "She manages this floor. She'll help you get comfortable." Mrs. Alvarez gave Maya the kind of look that did not ask questions because it already understood too much. "Come, sweetheart," she said gently. "There's a private washroom through here." Maya followed her, grateful and humiliated all at once. In the washroom, Mrs. Alvarez helped her dry her hair and gave her a warm towel for her hands. The company jacket was too large, but it covered the blouse that had turned nearly transparent from the rain. The soft shoes felt strange after walking so far in broken heels. "Don't be ashamed," Mrs. Alvarez said quietly. Maya looked at her in the mirror. The older woman squeezed water from the end of Maya's braid. "I've worked for rich people for 27 years. Some arrive dry and leave nothing but mud behind. Some arrive soaked and bring dignity with them." Maya's throat tightened. "Thank you. Do you have children?" "One son, Noah." Mrs. Alvarez smiled. "How old?" 7. 7 is a beautiful age." "It is," Maya said. Then, after a pause, "It's also a terrifying one." Mrs. Alvarez understood, because they still believe you can fix everything. Maya looked down. That was exactly it. When she returned to Alexander's office, he had moved the interview from his desk to the sitting area. A cup of tea waited on the low table, along with a new copy of her resume printed cleanly and placed in a folder. Maya stared at it. "How did you?" "Your application is in our system," Alexander said. "I had it pulled." She sat carefully, still afraid of leaving damp marks on the expensive chair. Alexander took the seat across from her. For a moment he reviewed the resume. Maya watched his face, trying to read her chances in the small movements of his eyes. She had applied for the role of Executive Operations Coordinator, a job that sounded slightly above her reach on paper, but exactly like the kind of work she had already been doing for years without the title or the pay. Scheduling, vendor communication, budget tracking, client follow-up, crisis management. Motherhood had made her a logistics expert. Poverty had made her creative. Grief had made her precise. "You worked at Westbridge Medical Supplies for 8 years, Alexander said. "Yes. Started as a receptionist, promoted 4 times. "Yes. Then you left 3 years ago." "My husband died," she said. Alexander looked up. "I'm sorry," he said. "Thank you." What happened? Maya's hands tightened around the warm cup. She had answered that question in many forms, on government paperwork, at hospitals, in whispered explanations to Noah's teacher, in conversations with landlords who did not care but wanted to know when rent was coming. Caleb worked maintenance at a distribution plant, she said. There was an accident during an overnight shift. He went back into a restricted area because someone had left a machine running. He saved another worker from being hurt, but she stopped before the sentence could become too sharp. He didn't come home. Alexander's expression changed almost imperceptibly. It was not shock. It was recognition of liability, procedure, settlement language. The world of men who signed papers after ordinary families shattered. What plant? He asked. Maya looked down at her tea. Northline Industrial, she said. Alexander went still. Northline had once been a Kane subsidiary, not under Alexander's leadership, but under his father's. It had been sold years ago after a string of safety investigations. Alexander remembered seeing the name in old board files, buried beneath acquisition reports and quiet settlements. My father owned Northline, Alexander said. I know. The rain tapped against the office windows. The city outside had disappeared into grey. Alexander set the resume down slowly. You knew that when you applied here. Yes. Why? Maya breathed in. There were many answers, because Kane Global paid enough to keep Noah's medicines stocked, because she had the experience, because her landlord had given her 10 days, because the school nurse had called twice this month, because pride did not keep the lights on. But beneath all of those answers was another one, folded inside an envelope at the back of her folder. I needed work, she said, and I was told this company was different now. By whom? My father. What's his name? Maya hesitated. Thomas Harper. Alexander repeated it silently. The name meant nothing at first, then something flickered, not a memory exactly but the shape of one, a security badge, a man with tired eyes, a winter morning, his mother's voice saying, Tom is a good man. Alexander leaned forward. Did your father ever work for Kane Industries? Maya's eyes lifted. Yes, she said, a long time ago. The air in the room shifted. Alexander felt it before he understood it. The same strange pressure he had felt in the lobby when he saw Maya's shoes. The day was arranging itself around him, piece by piece, like a trap built from memory. What did he do? Alexander asked. He was a security guard. Alexander stood and walked to the window. The city was only a blur. Rain slid down the glass in crooked lines, and for a moment those lines became another window, another storm, another lobby where a woman in a blue coat had waited too long. Your father worked at the old Meridian building, he asked. Maya's face changed. You remember that? I remember very little clearly from then. My father remembered everything. Alexander turned back. Maya reached for her folder, then stopped. She had promised herself she would not bring this up unless the interview went badly. Then she had promised herself she would not bring it up unless she was sure Alexander was not like his father. Then she had promised herself she would never bring it up at all, because old secrets had a way of punishing poor people first. But there was a reason. Her father had made her take the envelope. 2 months before he died, Thomas Harper had sat in his recliner by the window, oxygen tube under his nose, rain scratching at the glass exactly like it did today. His hands had trembled as he held out the yellowed envelope. If you ever stand in front of Alexander Kane, he told Maya, you give him this. Dad, I'm never going to stand in front of Alexander Kane. You don't know that. Why would I? Because life circles back when truth has been waiting too long. Maya had almost smiled. Her father had become poetic near the end, saying things that sounded like riddles, but his eyes had been clear. What is it? Something I should have delivered 30 years ago. Then why didn't you? Thomas had looked toward Noah, who was coloring quietly at the kitchen table. Then he looked back at Maya with a shame so old it seemed carved into him. "Because fear is expensive," he said, "and poor men pay interest on it their whole lives." Now, sitting across from Alexander Kane, Maya opened the back flap of her folder. Alexander watched her remove an envelope protected inside a plastic sleeve. The envelope was old, cream-colored, and worn soft at the corners. Across the front, in faded blue ink, was written one name. Alexander. Not Mr. Kane. Not Alexander Victor Kane. Just Alexander. His breath caught. He knew that handwriting. For years he had convinced himself he had forgotten it. He had signed contracts worth billions with hands that did not shake. He had stared down hostile boards and foreign regulators and men twice his age who thought money could frighten him. But now, looking at 7 faded letters written by a woman gone from the world, Alexander felt 8 years old. "Where did you get that?" he whispered. "My father kept it," Maya said. "He said your mother gave it to him." Alexander sat down slowly. The office felt smaller than it had before. "My mother died when I was 9, he said, though he did not know why. Maybe because the envelope had made him need to say something true. "I know," Maya said. "No," Alexander replied, his voice low. "Most people know the version my father told." Maya did not answer. Alexander reached for the envelope, then stopped just before touching it. "What did your father tell you?" Maya's eyes softened with something that was not pity, but still hurt to receive. "He told me your mother came to the Meridian building during a storm," she said. "She was sick. She wanted to see Victor Kane. She had a letter. My father was working security that night." Alexander closed his eyes. The Meridian building had been his father's headquarters before Kane Tower existed. Alexander remembered the lobby only in fragments: gold trim, cold floors, men who never smiled, a guard desk too tall for him to see over. He remembered going there once with his mother when he was very small. He remembered her gripping his hand too tightly. He remembered his father stepping out of an elevator and looking at them as if they were a problem someone else should solve. "Continue," Alexander said. Maya's voice was careful. "Your mother asked my father to deliver the letter if she couldn't get upstairs. He tried to call Mr. Kane's office, but he was told no visitors. He tried twice. Then Mr. Kane's assistant came down and told him if he kept making trouble, he'd lose his job." Alexander's face had gone pale. "My father had 3 children," Maya said. "My mother was pregnant with me. He needed the work, so he told your mother he was sorry." Outside, thunder rolled far away. "She left," Maya continued. "But before she did, she gave him the envelope and said, 'Then give it to my son one day, not Victor, Alexander.'" Alexander looked at the envelope again. "He didn't give it to me." "No," Maya said. "He was fired 2 weeks later anyway. He said he tried to find you, but by then Victor Kane had taken custody. Your mother was gone. Your home was empty. Nobody would tell him where you were. After a while, he convinced himself giving you the letter would only bring more pain." Alexander's mouth tightened. "Pain was already there," he said. Maya looked down. "I know." He touched the envelope at last. The paper felt impossibly fragile. "May I?" he asked. "It's yours." Alexander opened it with the care of someone handling a living thing. Inside was a single folded page. The handwriting was faded but unmistakable, uneven in places. His mother, he remembered watching her write grocery lists on the backs of old receipts. He remembered her leaving notes in his lunchbox when she could afford lunch. He remembered the way she shaped the capital A in his name like a small ladder. He read silently. Maya looked away, giving him privacy, but she could not stop hearing her father's voice in her mind. "Truth has a sound," Thomas had told her once. "When it finally lands, everybody in the room hears it, even if nobody speaks." Alexander's hands began to tremble by the second paragraph. The letter was not long. Ruth Kane had written that she was sorry she could not protect him from the world of his father. She had written that Victor would try to make him ashamed of where he came from. She had written that money could build towers, but it could also build walls inside a man. She had written that if Alexander ever became powerful, he must use that power to open doors, not guard them. Then, near the end, she wrote words that made Alexander press his fist against his mouth. I went to him today not for myself, but because I am afraid of leaving you alone with people who think love is weakness. If he takes you, remember this, you are not his pride, his heir, or his second chance. You are my son. You were loved before you were useful. Alexander lowered the letter. For a long moment, he did not move. Maya sat still, holding her breath. She had expected anger. She had expected questions. She had not expected the billionaire CEO to look as if the floor beneath him had opened. When Alexander finally spoke, his voice was barely audible. My father told me she abandoned me. Maya's eyes filled before she could stop them. He said she left me because she couldn't handle raising me. Alexander stared at the letter. He told me she came to the building asking for money, and when he refused, she disappeared. Maya shook her head. My father said she came back twice. He said she looked for you. Alexander laughed once, without humor. All these years, he said, I built my whole life trying not to be the child she supposedly left behind. The words hung between them. Maya knew something about building a life around a wound. After Caleb died, people told her time would heal. What they did not tell her was that time also demanded rent, groceries, school forms, laundry, and bedtime stories. Grief did not pause motherhood. Some nights she cried silently in the shower because it was the only place Noah could not hear. Some mornings she stood over the sink with unpaid bills spread beside a bowl of cereal and asked God how much longer one person could be expected to be strong. Yet every morning, Noah woke up believing breakfast would happen, school would happen, mommy would smile, the world would continue. So the world continued. Alexander folded the letter with unsteady care. Why bring this today? My father asked me to, Maya said. He died last winter. Before he passed, he made me promise that if I ever had a chance, I would give it to you. And you happened to apply here. Maya smiled faintly, but it disappeared quickly. I applied to 37 places. This was the only interview that called back. Alexander studied her. There were coincidences that were random, and there were coincidences that arrived wearing the face of responsibility. Why did you walk? He asked again, but softer now. You said medicine for your son. Maya's expression closed slightly. There it was, the other truth, the one she guarded even more fiercely because it belonged to Noah. He has a heart condition, she said. Alexander's eyes sharpened. It's manageable, she added quickly, the way parents do when they are trying to keep other people from being frightened. Mostly, but he gets tired. Some medications help. Some days are good, some are not. Alexander remembered the line from the hook of their conversation, the $5 for medicine, and suddenly, the 6 miles through rain became more than determination. It became calculation. A mother choosing between keeping her child stable and keeping herself dry. What condition? He asked. Maya named it. Alexander knew it. Kane Global's medical technology division had invested heavily in pediatric monitoring devices for children with cardiac issues. He also knew the devices were expensive, too expensive. He had approved a price reduction plan months earlier, but the board had delayed implementation, citing market timing. Market timing. He suddenly hated the phrase. Does he have a monitor? Alexander asked. Maya looked embarrassed. He had one. Had. It broke. Insurance denied the replacement. I'm appealing. How long ago? 4 months. Alexander turned toward his desk, but stopped himself. He wanted to call someone immediately, fix it immediately, throw money at the problem until it disappeared. That was the instinct wealth gave people, the illusion that repair was the same as redemption. But Maya was watching him carefully, and he knew if he acted too quickly, it would look like charity meant to quiet guilt. "What's his name?" he asked. "Noah." Something moved across Alexander's face. "My mother loved that name," he said. Maya smiled despite herself. So did Caleb. The name Caleb pulled another memory from her, bright and painful. Her husband had been the kind of man who sang badly on purpose while making pancakes. He had believed broken things were not useless, only waiting for patience. When Maya's old washing machine rattled like it was full of rocks, Caleb took it apart, fixed it, and left a note on top that said, "She lives to fight another day." When Noah was born, Caleb held him for the first time and cried so openly the nurse had to look away. After the accident, Maya found Caleb's lunchbox still on the kitchen counter. He had forgotten it that night because Noah had been crying with a fever and Caleb had spent too long rocking him before leaving for his shift. For weeks afterward, Maya could not move the lunchbox. Then one morning, Noah asked if Daddy would need it in heaven. Maya packed it away that day. Alexander saw the grief pass over her face and recognized the privacy of it. "Tell me about Noah." Maya looked surprised. People asked about conditions, costs, limitations. Few asked about Noah. "He loves dinosaurs," she said, "but only the ones nobody can pronounce. He thinks T-Rex is overrated." Alexander almost smiled. "He draws buildings," Maya continued. "Hospitals mostly, but not normal hospitals. Ones with playgrounds on every floor and rooms where parents get beds too. He says when he grows up, he's going to build a place where nobody has to choose between medicine and rent." Alexander looked away. His mother's letter lay on the table between them like a witness. Nobody has to choose. His own company had built devices that could help children like Noah. His own board had debated whether helping them too cheaply might undermine premium positioning. He had sat in that meeting. He had pushed back, yes, but not hard enough. He had allowed delay because there were always delays in large companies, always committees, always strategic rollouts. Meanwhile, children waited. Mothers walked. Rain fell. A knock came at the door. Claire entered carefully, no longer sharp, no longer certain of her place in the world. "Mr. Kane, the board is assembled. They're asking if you'll join them." Alexander did not take his eyes off the letter. "Tell them I'll be there in 10 minutes. Claire nodded, then glanced at Maya. "Ms. Harper, I owe you an apology." Maya blinked. Claire's face flushed. "I treated you unfairly. I made an assumption based on your appearance, and I'm sorry." Maya could have been cruel. She had the right. But she thought of Claire's trembling hand in the lobby, the way fear traveled downward in buildings like this, from executives to managers to receptionists to applicants with wet shoes. "Thank you," Maya said. Claire looked relieved but not absolved. She left quietly. Alexander picked up Maya's resume again, but the interview had become something far larger than qualifications. "Your references are excellent," he said. "Your former supervisor described you as the person who kept the company standing during chaos." "That's generous. Is it true?" Maya gave a small, tired laugh. "Chaos and I are familiar." "You don't have a degree listed." "No, I started one, then my mother got sick and I helped my father. Later I planned to go back, but Noah came, then Caleb's accident." She lifted one shoulder. "Life kept needing the money before the diploma." Alexander nodded. His father would have dismissed her for that. Victor Kane had worshipped credentials because credentials protected men like him from people who had learned in harder classrooms. Alexander had tried to be different, but he knew pieces of Victor lived in the walls of the company still, in job filters, in salary bands, in polished lobby expectations. "What do you think this role requires?" Alexander asked. Maya sat straighter. The interview question gave her ground beneath her feet. "It requires discretion, organization, and the ability to anticipate problems before they become expensive," she said. "But more than that, It requires understanding people. Executives often think operations are about schedules and reports. They're not. They're about pressure. If you know where pressure is building, you can prevent things from breaking. Alexander's eyes narrowed with interest. And where is pressure building in this company? Maya hesitated. Honesty, Ms. Harper. She glanced toward the rain-streaked windows. In the space between what Kane Global says it values and what people experience when they walk through the door. Alexander leaned back. Explain. You have a foundation that funds opportunity programs, Maya said. Your website says you believe talent is everywhere, but access is not. But your entry-level application process requires stable internet, multiple unpaid interview rounds, and availability during work hours. That eliminates people who may be talented but poor, caregivers, hourly workers, people without transportation. She stopped herself, worried she had gone too far. Alexander's face revealed nothing. Continue. Your medical division says it wants to change pediatric care, but the families who need your devices most can't afford them unless their insurance cooperates. Your company has community language, but your systems still favor people already close to privilege. Silence. Maya's heartbeat thudded in her ears. Then Alexander said, that may be the best operations analysis anyone has given me this year. Maya exhaled. I wasn't trying to insult your company. You were trying to tell the truth. We've had consultants charge 7 figures and use prettier words to say less. Maya almost smiled. Alexander stood. I need to attend this board meeting. Maya's stomach dropped. Of course. I want you in the room. She stared at him. What? You said you understand pressure. Come watch it build. Mr. Kane, I'm not dressed for. You're dressed like someone who fought to be here. That's enough. The boardroom was 2 doors down and looked like power had been carved into furniture. A long black table dominated the room. Screens lined one wall. 12 people sat waiting, most older than Alexander, all dressed in expensive confidence. Conversations stopped when Alexander entered with Maya beside him. Several board members looked at her wet hair, oversized company jacket, and soft temporary shoes. Their faces did not change much, but Maya had worked enough front desks to read micro-expressions: confusion, disapproval, curiosity, irritation. Alexander pulled out a chair near his own. Ms. Harper will be joining us, he said. A silver-haired man at the far end, Malcolm Pierce, smiled without warmth. Are we expanding board attendance to visitors now? Alexander sat, only the useful ones. Maya sat carefully, wishing the floor would open. Malcolm Pierce had been Victor Kane's closest advisor, and though Victor was dead, Malcolm still behaved like he was guarding the old king's throne. He had opposed Alexander's changes for years with the patience of a man who believed conscience was a temporary fever. We are already behind schedule, Malcolm said. The main item is the pediatric monitor pricing plan. Maya looked up. Alexander noticed. A woman named Denise from finance began presenting. Charts appeared. Market segmentation, revenue projections, insurance reimbursement cycles, competitive positioning, recommended delay of affordability initiative by 18 months. 18 months. Maya's hands tightened under the table. Noah's monitor had been broken for 4. Alexander watched her instead of the screen. Denise clicked to another slide. Our analysis suggests immediate price reduction would negatively affect investor confidence and create expectations across other product lines. We recommend piloting charitable access through the foundation instead of adjusting core pricing. Charity instead of fairness, Alexander said. The room went still. Denise faltered, I wouldn't phrase it that way. I would. Malcolm sighed. Alexander, we've discussed this. Emotional framing does not change fiduciary responsibility. No, Alexander said, but moral failure has a cost too. we just hide it better. Malcolm's eyes moved briefly to Maya. Perhaps this conversation should remain among those with full context. Alexander turned to Maya. Ms. Harper, how much did insurance quote you for a replacement monitor? Maya felt every eye swing toward her. She wanted to disappear. But then she thought of Noah, hospital with playgrounds, and Caleb's belief that broken things were waiting for patience. She thought of her father carrying a letter for 30 years because fear had taught him silence. She thought of Ruth Kane walking into a storm and being turned away by men with full context. She lifted her chin. After denial, Maya said, $3,800. A few board members shifted. What is your monthly rent? Alexander asked. $1,400. Monthly medication. Usually between $200 and $400, depending on what insurance covers. Childcare. My neighbor helps when she can, otherwise I trade cleaning and errands. Alexander turned back to the board. There's your market context. Malcolm's jaw tightened. Anecdotes are not strategy. Maya surprised herself by speaking. No, but they reveal who strategy forgets. The words landed hard. Alexander looked at her with something like respect. Malcolm did not, and you are. Maya felt heat rise in her face. A candidate for employment. A candidate, Malcolm repeated, making the words smaller. Then perhaps you should allow those responsible for governing a multinational company to. Careful, Alexander said. The warning was quiet. Malcolm leaned back. Alexander stood. I'm approving the affordability initiative effective immediately. Denise looked startled. That would require restructuring. Then restructure. The board hasn't voted. The board approved discretionary humanitarian pricing authority last year after the European inquiry. You buried it in compliance language and assumed I wouldn't use it. Malcolm's face hardened. This is impulsive. No, Alexander said, this is overdue. He looked around the room. My mother once walked through rain to a Kane building and was turned away because people inside cared more about procedure than humanity. Today, I watched another mother walk through rain to this building. She was nearly turned away too. Nobody spoke. Alexander placed his mother's letter on the table, still folded. I cannot change what my father did. I cannot return what his silence cost. But I can decide whether this company continues to reward the instincts that made that silence possible. Malcolm's eyes flickered toward the letter. For the first time, something like fear crossed his face. Maya saw it. So did Alexander. Do you recognize this? Alexander asked. Malcolm's expression smoothed too quickly. Should I? It's a letter from my mother. I knew many things of your mother only through Victor. Did you know she came to Meridian asking to see him before she died? The room became ice. Malcolm folded his hands. Alexander, old family pain has no place in. Answer me. A muscle moved in Malcolm's cheek. I was aware of certain incidents, he said. Incidents? She was unstable, according to Victor. Maya felt anger rise in her chest. Alexander smiled slightly, but it held no warmth. My father called every woman unstable when her truth threatened his convenience. Malcolm's eyes sharpened. You are emotional. Yes, Alexander said, and still correct. He turned to the board secretary. Record this. Effective today, Kane Global will implement the Pediatric Affordability Initiative. Finance will revise projections around access, not exclusion. Legal will audit all legacy safety settlements connected to Northline Industrial. Human Resources will review hiring barriers across non-degree roles. And Malcolm Pierce is suspended from Board Advisory Authority pending investigation into legacy misconduct and concealment. Malcolm stood. You don't have the votes. Alexander looked down the table. Then call one. For the next 10 minutes, Maya witnessed something she would never forget. Power did not explode the way it did in movies. It shifted quietly. A glance here, a silence there, a woman from the ethics committee asking for the letter to be entered confidentially, a younger board member saying the company had delayed reform long enough, Denise from finance, after a long pause, admitting that implementation was possible in 90 days if executive leadership accepted lower margins in the first year. Malcolm looked around and realized the room he had controlled for decades was no longer obeying him. When the vote passed 7-5, he gathered his papers with trembling hands. At the door, he turned back. "Your father built this company." Alexander looked at the rain beyond the glass. "No," he said, "people like my mother did. He just put his name on it." After the boardroom emptied, Maya remained seated, stunned. Alexander stood at the window with his hands in his pockets. "You changed all that because of me?" she asked. He shook his head. "Because of what you made impossible to ignore." "I didn't mean to cause trouble." "You didn't cause it, you revealed it." Maya looked at the polished table, the empty leather chairs, the screens now dark. "What happens now?" "To the company, a fight," he turned. "To you, that depends." Her chest tightened. "Mr. Kane, I don't want special treatment." "You won't get it." He picked up her resume from where he had carried it into the room. "You are not qualified for the job you applied for." Maya's face fell before she could stop it. Alexander continued, "You're overqualified for it." She blinked. "I need someone who sees the gaps between policy and people," he said. "Someone who can build systems that don't humiliate the people they claim to serve. I'm creating a new role, Director of Access Operations. It will sit between HR, medical technology, and the foundation. You'll report directly to my office for the first year." Maya stared at him as if he had spoken another language. "I don't have a degree," she whispered. "You have evidence." "I've never directed anything." "You directed survival under conditions most executives couldn't endure for a week." Her eyes filled. He named a salary. Maya stopped breathing. It was more money than she had ever imagined earning, enough for rent without panic, medicine without choosing, shoes that did not split open in the rain, a fixed window, marshmallow cereal, maybe even a savings account, the mythical creature of her adult life. "Mr. Kane," she said, voice shaking, "I don't know what to say." "Say you'll consider it." "I don't need to consider it." A faint smile touched his face. "Then say yes." Maya pressed a hand to her mouth. "Yes." For the first time that day, she cried. Not loudly, not dramatically, just a quiet breaking open, the kind that happens when a person has been holding up the sky and someone finally says, "Let me take one corner." Alexander looked away to give her dignity. But he was not untouched. On the table, his mother's letter rested beside Maya's resume. 2 pieces of paper, both nearly ruined by rain, had done what years of strategy sessions could not. They had told the truth. By late afternoon, the storm had softened into a gray drizzle. Mrs. Alvarez brought Maya's clothes, freshly dried by someone from facilities who insisted it was no trouble. HR came upstairs with paperwork. Legal came with confidentiality documents. Alexander personally called the head of Kane Medical Access and asked for a replacement monitor to be delivered to Noah that evening, billed under a new emergency bridge program that, by the end of the week, would no longer exist for just one child. Maya resisted at first. "I can't accept." "It's not a gift," Alexander said. "It's the first test of a system we should have built already." "That she could accept." At 5:30, Alexander's driver pulled up to the front entrance. Maya stood under the awning, looking at the black car, then back at the sidewalk she had crossed hours earlier in humiliation. Claire approached from the reception desk. "Ms. Harper." Maya turned. Claire held out a small paper bag. "I know it doesn't fix this morning, but there's a bakery across the street. Mrs. Alvarez said your son might like chocolate muffins. Maya accepted it, surprised. Thank you. Claire's eyes were damp. I almost didn't get this job 10 years ago. I was late to my interview because my babysitter didn't show. Someone gave me grace. I forgot what that felt like when I got comfortable. Maya nodded slowly. Comfort can make people forget the weather. Claire gave a small, sad smile. Yes, it can. The ride home felt unreal. Maya sat in the back of the car with the bakery bag on her lap and a temporary employment packet beside her. The driver, a kind older man named Ellis, kept the radio low. City blocks passed in reverse order, each one a reminder of the morning's pain. There was the pharmacy where she had spent $5. There was the bus stop where she had stood before deciding she could not risk waiting. There was the underpass where a truck had splashed water up to her knees. There was the church sign that read, "Even storms obey purpose," which she had rolled her eyes at while shivering because purpose did not keep socks dry. Now she wondered. When the car turned onto her street, Maya's building looked even more tired than usual. Brick stained by years of weather, rusted railing, a front step cracked down the middle, but in the third-floor window, a small face appeared. Noah. He vanished immediately, probably running to the door. Maya thanked Ellis and climbed the stairs with her heart pounding harder than it had during the interview. Their apartment door flew open before she reached it. Mommy! Noah wrapped his arms around her waist. She held him so tightly he squeaked. You're wet, he said. I was wetter before. Did the interview happen? Maya knelt in front of him, his curls stuck up on one side. His dinosaur pajama shirt was inside out. His eyes. Caleb's eyes searched her face for the future. It happened, she said. And she pulled the bakery bag from behind her back. First, I brought muffins. His eyes widened. Chocolate. Chocolate. Did you get the job? Maya smiled through tears. Yes, baby, I got the job. Noah shouted so loudly Mrs. Donnelly from next door opened her door in alarm. She got it, Noah yelled. My mom got the job. Mrs. Donnelly, who had watched Noah that morning without asking for payment, clasped both hands to her chest. Oh, thank God. Maya laughed and cried and somehow did both while holding the muffins. Later, after Noah ate half a muffin and saved the other half for breakfast in case success tastes good tomorrow too, a delivery arrived. A technician from Kane Medical Access stood at the door with a device case and paperwork that said no payment due. Maya looked at the man, then at the case, then at Noah, who had gone very quiet. Is that for me? He asked. The technician smiled. Yes, sir, and I hear you're a dinosaur expert, so I'll explain it in dinosaur terms. Noah lit up. As the technician set up the monitor, Maya stood by the kitchen counter, gripping the edge with both hands. Relief washed through her so strongly it almost hurt. Her phone buzzed. A message from an unknown number. Ms. Harper, this is Alexander Kane. I hope the device arrived. Also, I found one more line in my mother's letter I think belongs to you today. Sometimes the person who brings the truth will arrive tired. Let them in anyway. Maya read it 3 times. Then she typed back. She would be glad you did. Across the city, Alexander sat alone in his office long after everyone else had left. The storm had finally stopped, and the windows reflected his face over the dark skyline. On his desk were 3 things. His mother's letter. Maya's signed acceptance. A photograph he had taken from a locked drawer that afternoon, one he had not looked at in years. Ruth Kane standing in front of a laundromat, smiling with one hand on young Alexander's shoulder. Her blue coat was buttoned wrong. His wooden airplane was tucked under his arm. He had spent most of his life believing love had left him. Now he knew love had walked through rain and been turned away. That truth did not heal him instantly. Real truth rarely did. It entered like weather through a cracked window, making noise until someone finally decided to repair what had been broken. The next morning, Kane Global employees arrived to find an internal memo from Alexander Kane. It announced the immediate launch of the Access Operations Office, a full review of hiring barriers, a pediatric device affordability program, and a legacy accountability audit. It also announced the appointment of Maya Harper as founding director. People talked. Some praised it, some mocked it. Some said Alexander had become sentimental. Some said Maya was a publicity move. Malcolm Pierce's allies whispered that a soaked applicant had manipulated a grieving CEO with an old letter. But by noon, the story had already moved beyond the building. Someone from the lobby had recorded a few seconds of Alexander stopping Maya from leaving. No sound, just the image. A drenched woman with a ruined folder, a billionaire CEO standing between her and the rain, the lobby frozen around them. The clip spread. By evening, news outlets called. Maya refused interviews at first. She did not want to be turned into a symbol. Symbols did not have laundry, school pickups, or children who needed bedtime. But Alexander told her she owed no one her pain, and that made her trust him more. A week later, she agreed to one interview on the condition that the focus remain on access, not pity. When the interviewer asked her what she felt during the 6-mile walk, Maya thought carefully. "I felt afraid," she said. "I felt embarrassed. I felt tired. But mostly I felt responsible. That's what people don't understand about parents in survival mode. We're not trying to be inspiring. We're trying to get home with good news." Millions watched that answer. But the moment that changed everything came at the end, when the interviewer asked Alexander why he had hired her. He looked at Maya, then at the camera. "Because she saw my company clearly," he said, "and because my mother once asked me not to forget to look down when I got somewhere high. Maya reminded me I had stopped looking." Months passed. Maya did not become rich overnight, though to Noah, the new apartment with reliable heat felt like a palace. She did not magically stop worrying, because worry had lived in her bones too long to leave without notice. For weeks, she still checked prices at the grocery store, as if the old budget might jump from behind the cereal boxes and drag her back. But slowly, life changed. Noah got stronger with consistent monitoring and care. The cracked window was replaced. Marshmallow cereal appeared in the pantry, though Maya still insisted it was sometimes food. Mrs. Donnelly received a monthly childcare payment from Maya and cried the first time she saw it. Caleb's lunchbox came out of storage and found a place on a shelf beside Noah's drawings, not as a wound now, but as proof that love did not end just because a life did. At Kane Global, Maya became inconvenient in the best way. She asked why forms required documents many applicants did not have. She asked why interviews could not offer evening slots. She asked why unpaid internships existed in a company with billions in reserves. She asked why medical assistance programs were written at a college reading level when exhausted parents needed clarity at midnight. At first, executives smiled tightly. Then they learned she came prepared. Maya did not speak loudly. She brought data, stories, cost models, and solutions. She turned survival skills into operational frameworks. She could spot waste because she had lived without enough. She could identify bottlenecks because bureaucracy had stood between her and medicine. She knew which policies sounded generous but functioned like locked doors. Alexander backed her publicly, but privately, Maya challenged him too. "You still use fear too much," she told him one evening after a tense meeting. He looked up from his desk. "Excuse me. You're kinder than your father, but you still make people afraid to disappoint you. Fear gets obedience, not honesty." Most people would have softened the words. Maya did not. Alexander looked toward the wooden airplane on his table, and honesty gets 6-mile walks in the rain. "Sometimes," she said, "but it also gets doors opened before the next person has to walk." He smiled faintly, noted. Their relationship became one of mutual rescue, though neither would have called it that. Alexander gave Maya opportunity, resources, and a platform. Maya gave Alexander something rarer in his world: correction without ambition, loyalty without flattery, truth without cruelty. On the anniversary of Ruth Kane's death, Alexander visited her grave for the first time in 11 years. He did not go alone. Maya came because he asked, and Noah came because he had drawn a picture of a hospital with playgrounds and wanted to give it to the lady who raised Mr. Kane to care. The cemetery was quiet. No rain that day, only pale sunlight and a breeze moving through the trees. Alexander stood before the stone, holding his mother's letter. For years he had avoided the place because grief there felt like accusation. Now it felt like conversation. "I'm sorry," he said softly. Maya stood a respectful distance away, her hand on Noah's shoulder. Alexander swallowed. "I believed him. I let him turn your absence into anger. I thought becoming powerful would prove I didn't need what I lost." The wind moved through the grass. "I was wrong," he said. Noah stepped forward, holding out his drawing. "My mom says people in heaven can't take paper, but maybe she can see it." Alexander crouched beside him. "I think she can." Noah placed the drawing near the grave. At the top, in uneven letters, he had written, "A place where everybody gets help." Alexander stared at it for a long time. Then he looked at Maya. "We should build it," he said. Maya thought he meant metaphorically. He did not. 2 years later, the Ruth Kane Children's Access Center opened on the east side of the city, 3 blocks from the laundromat where Alexander had once lived. It was not a hospital, not exactly. It was a care coordination center for families navigating pediatric chronic illness, with monitoring support, insurance advocacy, transportation assistance, respite rooms, financial counseling, and yes, a playground on every floor. Noah cut the ribbon with oversized scissors and declared the building almost as cool as a dinosaur, but more useful. The video went viral. Reporters called it the ending of a beautiful story. Maya knew better. Beautiful stories did not end when cameras left. They continued in waiting rooms, budget meetings, late-night phone calls, and the daily work of making sure compassion survived contact with systems. One rainy morning, nearly 3 years after her walk, Maya arrived at Kane Global Tower for a meeting. She no longer entered through the lobby with her shoulders tense. She knew the guards by name. Claire waved from reception. Near the entrance, a new sign had been installed months earlier. "If they made it to the door, they deserve to be seen." No one outside the company knew the sentence came from a conversation between Maya and Alexander after a long day. No one knew it was also an apology carved into policy. Maya paused in front of it. Rain tapped against the glass. For a moment she saw herself as she had been that day, soaked, ashamed, clutching a folder, one step away from turning back into the storm. Then the elevator opened. Alexander stepped out, older in small ways, lighter in others. "You're early," he said. "So are you. I had a call with the center. And the transportation fund is already at capacity." Maya sighed. "I warned finance." "You did. And I told them to expand it." She smiled. "You're learning. I have a difficult teacher. She sounds wise. Relentless. That too." They stood together, looking out at the rain. A young woman hurried through the revolving doors, holding a child's hand and a folder under her coat. Her shoes were wet. Her face carried the familiar mixture of hope and fear. Maya noticed her first. Then Alexander did. The receptionist stood, smiling warmly before the woman could speak. "Good morning," Claire said. "You must be here for the Access Program interview. We're glad you made it in from the rain." The young woman's face crumpled with relief. Maya looked at Alexander. He looked back. Neither needed to say anything. Some storms returned, some wounds echoed, some stories circled back again and again asking whether the lesson had truly been learned. This time, the door opened before anyone had to beg. And somewhere in the quiet chambers of memory, a woman in a blue coat, a tired security guard with a hidden letter, a father named Caleb who fixed broken things, and a little boy dreaming of better hospitals all seemed to stand inside that lobby too. Not as ghosts, as proof. Proof that one act of courage can expose a lie. Proof that one buried letter can bring down a wall. Proof that a mother walking through rain for her child may be carrying more than a resume. She may be carrying the truth that changes everything.